The Trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. I want to talk about this today since I think that a lot of people struggle with being articulate. And it has gotten better over recent years, probably because of the increase in podcasts and content creators, which also helped this or possibly hurt it. There is brain rot and attention span being lowered as a byproduct of reels and shorts and TikToks. So, in general, I've noticed that there's been an upward trajectory towards people being more articulate and less inarticulate, but nonetheless, I still do think that there is more work to be done. And that we also are in a very feels before real society, at least in terms of the Western world, where feelings are prioritized at the expense of logic. And I don't think that they are zero sum, but more people than I'd like to think actually do believe that they are effectively zero sum. And rhetoric, when people state their opinion as a fact and use hyperbole and superlatives, for example, to sound more confident and convincing, which I think is done in a way sleazier way than I would like. I'm going to be discussing about, at the very least, grammar and potentially rhetoric. We'll see how we go for time in today's episode. But with that being said, welcome to the It Be What It Be podcast, powered by StreamYard. As you can see, definitely quite a small channel, and relatively small channel, and so there is still a few budget production factors that are happening here, especially since you can see like my studio through the reflection of my sunglasses. But that being said, here we are with a brand new YouTube channel started up in December of 2024, trying to get into 2025 hitting the ground running and not trying to necessarily just start a new YouTube channel and then trying to figure it out. Well, I am going to be building the plane as I'm flying it, but I wanted to just get a little bit of momentum going into 2025. We are the channel where we are unveiling and addressing the mechanics of people, interpersonal interaction, societal influences, and life in general. For throughout my life, many people would claim that intangibles are not quantifiable and that situations in life just happen, and that it is impossible to be articulated or put into words. That never sat well with me. Hence, here I am sharing some of what I've discovered while continuing to learn more along the way, and also while not letting the behaviors of the Homo sapien species off the hook. Be sure to take a look at some of the socials. Right there, literally, I was actually just reading off of the. Let me see if I can bring this one up actually. See if I can. Yes. Yes, I can. Just going off of what was presented on YouTube as a new YouTube channel. We'll just read out some of the description. Once again, be sure to take a look at some of the different socials. We have an Instagram, Threads, a Twitter, or X, depending on what your preference may be, Blue Sky, and TikTok. We are still a new channel growing in views and in videos. Joined at the 1st of December and using a lot of this December period as a bit of a trial run to be able to get into the new year hitting the ground running. Looking at some of the different shorts that are available over here. As you can see, I criticize shorts, and yet I'm also going to be part of the problem, as it were. And even having our live streams, our first introduction one, as well as this current one, where I'm going to be talking about the liberal arts and the lost art of the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Now, with that being said, I have a series of different videos that I'm going to be very interested in going through. And on top of that, I wanted to start off by just talking about how there are 7 liberal arts, which are separated into the Trivium and the Quadrivium. And this channel mainly focuses on what is contributed by the Trivium. I actually found a YouTube channel that I'd like to share right now, and that is Amor, Amor. And in this YouTube channel, it's a YouTube channel that's actually been active for about 12 years now, probably at minimum 12 years, and potentially going more into that. In fact, let's just take a quick look, see
Ad hominem is a
how old their oldest video actually, in fact, is. And so there you have it. This is going to be going on 13 years. So, what I'm trying to say is that a lot of what is brought up with this particular video and live stream that I'm doing in terms of trying to address the liberal arts and the impact that they would have had historically, the way that they got lost and corrupted in the modern day, in the contemporary age, as it were. And that a lot of the intention of this channel, from what it is that I could derive, advocate of mystery, order, and reason, which I can just see right over here from a channel that started off in January 31st, 2012. And what it is that I'm just trying to get at here is that a lot of what it is that I'm trying to bring up is somewhat, to an extent, outdated. Admittedly, I mean, it took a while for me to get into a position where I had the time and the ability and also the mentality. It wasn't necessarily just start. I do think that I'm in the best place in my life to start this channel. I think that the amount of awareness that I have at this point in my life, in my 30s, and the life experiences and some of the trial and error that I went through gives me a lot more of an ability to speak about these subjects that I want to cover with not only a lot more conviction, but also just a lot more wisdom. Because, like I said, there was some trial and error. A lot of what I want to bring up in terms of logic, which we could get to later on. So, a little bit of a teaser there, a breadcrumb for you to be able to follow. But ultimately, what it is that I'm just trying to get at is that while some of these concepts are more than a decade old, and I think that a lot of them were a lot more relevant when there was the coming of Donald Trump into the 2016 American election, and that would have had a lot more political polarization, which exists still to this day. That there's a lot more political polarization in the United States than there was historically ever before. And that a lot of the conversations and the debates turned into fights and arguments where people are competing more than collaborating to try to find the truth, for example. And it's a lot more antagonistic. And I think that the quality of conversation between different people has really deteriorated. And I think that that is really disgusting, frankly. And I don't like the state of the modern day debate. I definitely think that there's not only a lot of corruption, but just a lot of immaturity as well, and a lot of antagonism, way more than that's actually necessary. And so a lot of the content on the channel, logical fallacies that you're seeing here, the Trivium, was meant to be able to promote critical thinking, essentially, and to be able to make conversations a lot more civil, essentially. And there's more that I have to say about that. But ultimately, what I'm trying to get at is that I still think that there's much more work to be done even now. And so I am going to be referring to some material that is years old, but some of it also is pretty new. And so I have a show here for you. Yes, indeed, that rhymed. And I'm going to start off with this first video, the introduction to the Trivium. Let's go right now.
Want to know the secret to my success? I hired an accountability coach. Let me explain.
Let me skip this ad.
There are 4 things I'm going to cover in this video. First, what is the Trivium? Second, where did it come from? Third, why learn the Trivium? And fourth, just some final notes. What is the Trivium? The Trivium is a Latin term meaning literally 3 ways. The Trivium is composed of grammar, logic, and rhetoric.
So as you can see, the Trivium, it is a trifecta. I mean, obviously for, the English-speaking word. So quadrivium would be 4. And as I said that there were 7 liberal arts, and let's hear what he has to say about them.
However, when I say grammar, I don't just mean syntax or spelling. I mean something much broader. Grammar is meant to cover the whole range of how we interact with symbols. We will go into much greater detail in a later video. Grammar is concerned with things as they are symbolized. Logic.
So I think that that's very interesting that grammar, in fact, if I was just to bump back into the video, things as symbols, art of language, I mean, definitely some of the symbols that you would notice would be the alphabets, those would be symbols. Also, sign language, hieroglyphs, emojis would be symbols as well. Even some of the symbols that you just see on the screen over here, like a play button, for example, the volume symbol, so on and so forth. So all of that would be included in the grammar category.
Detail in a later video. Grammar is concerned with things as they are symbolized. Logic is the art of thinking. It is concerned with things as they are known.
So I think that that's also very interesting. The art of language, the art of thinking, and the things as they are known, and there's certainly, I like to say, like a mathematical element that's applied and inherent into logic as well, which I do think is also pretty interesting to note, but nonetheless.
Logic is the art of thinking. It is concerned with things as they are known. Rhetoric is the art of communication and is concerned with how things are best communicated. Each of these arts interact with each other, but rhetoric combines them in a special way and requires mastery of both grammar and logic together to work. Relatedly, there is...
So in that regard, definitely when it comes down to what they're saying about grammar, about the way that some of the information is presented, I'll make sure that I actually get the art of communication. So the way that the logic and the thinking and the way that the symbols and the language and thinking are communicated to be able to either like persuade someone, but that could also be manipulation tactics as well. And that's part of why I also do think that the liberal arts have been corrupted. But nonetheless, we'll continue and carry on. And how I really like how rhetoric is the combination of the earlier two, but nonetheless.
And requires mastery of both grammar and logic together to work. Relatedly, there is also the quadrivium, which means, unsurprisingly, 4 ways. The quadrivium is composed of arithmetic, music, geometry, and astronomy.
Like I said, this is not going to be as relevant for the purpose of this channel, generally speaking, as of right now, but we'll just let it rock, and then I'll get to the next main course.
However, again, arithmetic is knowledge of numbers in general, including algebra, equations, etc. Geometry or figure is number applied to space, including analytic geometry and trigonometry. Music is much more than just music as you might think of it, but it is basically all discrete or continuous change. It is number applied to time, such as calculus, differential equations, and some of chemistry.
So yeah, just jumping in there to say that, that there's just a bit more depth that he goes into it with, but again, the quadrivium not necessarily relevant.
Astronomy was the study of motion, or number applied to time and space. It is much of physics. As you can imagine, this classification...
And so, let's see what he has to continue to say.
...can either branch to all fields of knowledge or serve as the foundation for them. These 7 arts of the trivium and quadrivium are the liberal arts, or at least were the liberal arts until they were corrupted. But that's for...
And I just really resonate with that line. They were the liberal arts until they were corrupted. I mean, he says it's for another video, but he goes into a bit of history. Let's hear what he has to say.
for another story. Art here is much broader than painting or sculpting. It is just anything to be made or done. These arts are therefore more than just practice in production, but also about knowledge. Where did the Trivium come from? The first book on grammar originated with Dionysius Thrax in 166 BC. In the late ancient era, this was combined with Aristotle's Logic and Rhetoric. As early as
Aristotle's Logic and Rhetoric, as early as
the 5th century AD, we see the 7 liberal arts explicitly in The Marriage of Philology and Mercury by Martin.
So just on that, not the right one. as early as the 5th century, so in the 1400s, as early as the 5th century AD, the liberal arts. And pay close attention to this, because we're about to see this particular diagram pop up once more. But nonetheless,
Tinius Capella. These arts became the foundation of all future specializations. In fact, the Bachelor of Arts would only be awarded to those who had some level of mastery over them. In the ancient and medieval...
So I really like that as well, because the Bachelor of Arts was only awarded to some people who had some sort of mastery over the liberal arts. One of the parts that I want to really raise here, and just take a little bit of the screen up for a bit here. Like, one of the parts that I really want to just emphasize about what's being presented just over here is that that's part of the liberal arts being lost in the modern day. And what I think is very interesting when looking into human history, like particularly the Renaissance as well. The Renaissance had quite a bit to do with being able to resurface the liberal arts, and that they were really being used a lot more prominently. And I won't spoil some of what the video has to say, but they were being used a lot more prominently up until recent centuries, I'll put it that way. Especially once again, as early as the 400s, the 5th century AD. And now it's no longer the case that the liberal arts are really part of the curriculums. And so it's entirely possible for people to walk out of their education without having this, what I consider to be a very healthy and necessary foundation for thinking, because schools nowadays, they really teach people what to think and not necessarily how to think. And I think that a lot of people know about this. One of the reasons why some of what I'm doing may be somewhat outdated or less culturally relevant. But to an extent, I also think that at the very least, this is a lot more mainstream for people to be realizing that school gets them into a job and not necessarily telling them how to think. And so there's a lot of value loaded lessons in school that say that it's not that this is just the raw information, it's that this is what this information represents, or in other words, like, this, what happened in this part of history is bad, objectively bad, for example, and other factors like that. And what it is that I'm just trying to say is that I think that this was very unfortunate that we no longer have the liberal arts as a part of our everyday modern society, at the very least, in terms of it being included in the education system to be able to encourage people to know or have more critical thinking, because other than that, then we're just running into like a school system that just tells people how they can go in and get a job, not even how, like, that conditions them to show up on time, listen to authority, to get assignments done on time, to be there 5 days a week, to be consistent, to be compliant, just conditioning them to be ideal factory-based workers. But nonetheless, I just wanted to address that, and he'll be saying some more about that part, but I'll give you back the bigger screen, and we're going to continue getting into it.
Universities, one could go on to study law, medicine, science, or theology only after mastering the 7 liberal arts. This was the core and standard curriculum up until the late 19th and early 20th century. Compulsory.
So there, you just said it right there, that you'd have to study the liberal arts before someone could go on to study law, for example, up until the late 19th and early 20th century. So that's the late 1800s and the early 1900s. So for about a century, this has been no longer the case, which I think is extremely tragic. But I digress.
Education basically gutted the higher standards for a hodgepodge of disciplines. In reality, most schooling is glorified daycare and subservience training for an industrial economy, an economy that is exponentially changing at an exponential rate. Just as an example of the higher standards in the past, in most classical programs, it was expected that fifth graders be able to read Latin and some Greek, as well as a firm mastery over everything else you'd expect a present-day high schooler to have. As we have
So there you have it. I mean, just basically saying some of what it is that I'm sure that some of you would have already worked out in and of yourself, but nonetheless.
entered the digital economy, these arts will only increase in value. Hopefully, I can present them in a modified form that preserves the good and adapts it to our contemporary age. The thing
That's also what it is that I'm trying to do, kind of in a manner of speaking, picking up the torch from this video that was at least 3 years old. I'd like to be able to preserve the good of the liberal arts, but I think that part of preserving the good is also highlighting some of the ways that the liberal arts have been corrupted, so that then ideally it brings these different sleazier, snakish tactics, weaselly tactics to the surface and makes them more detectable by the people that are interacting with them. And it allows for them to be stifled and discouraged. But that's easier said than done, especially depending on the situation that you happen to be in. Way easier said than done. But nonetheless, what I will say is that when one piece of wisdom that I received from Robert Greene, someone who's really been very inspirational to me in a lot of ways, and he put a lot in perspective for me with some of his different books. Ryan Holiday has also said it as well, and Ryan Holiday was Robert Greene was the mentor to Ryan Holiday, so mentor mentee. And it wouldn't surprise me that Ryan Holiday also said it as well. I believe it came from Robert Greene first, but feel free to fact check me on that. But nonetheless, to get to the point, what it is that I'm trying to say is that the quote essentially, not verbatim, but to get to the point, is just because you are not using particular power tactics against someone else doesn't mean that those power tactics are not being used against you. In other words, you may be operating by a particular set of rules, especially when you're interacting with someone else, but they're not necessarily operating by the same set of rules. And there's a number of different implications that come to that, but for the sake of just staying on track, it's just interesting. I don't necessarily have a really convicted answer as to like whether or not some people, if they go low, then you go high. But generally speaking, the people who are playing with a more liberal set of rules, and therefore, let's say you're having a debate, but one person is competing, the other person's collaborating. The person that's competing is essentially willing to lie to win, to make certain points. Like, say for example, someone who's religious, let's say Catholic or Christian, and you ask them, "Oh, like, are you true to your faith?" They say, "Yes, I'm true to my faith." They say yes, they're true to their faith, and then say you were to ask them, "Have you had no intercourse before marriage?" And then they lie. That type of example. Nonetheless, so that's where I'd like to highlight some of these different situations. Of course, that lie is harder to identify per se because I mean you're relying on information that needs to be verified by the other party, whether or not you trust the other party, which is where I do think that character can come into play, but I'll get into that later on. But my main point just being is that I'd like to preserve the good and the virtuous parts of the liberal arts while also trying to figure out different ways to discourage the use and to diminish the corrupt use of the liberal arts.
Thing is, though, any modifications are unlikely to be much more than translating the core of these arts to a specific context. If you think about it, knowledge advances in only two ways: addition or subtraction. Knowledge can further be classified into broad categories based on their relationship to change. For example, things like logic, mathematics, and semiotics are absolute, whereas physics, chemistry, mechanics, and the laws of natural selection are more permanent.
And I think that that's very interesting. Logic is more absolute. And so it mathematics, right? 2 plus 2 equals 4, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 3 equals 4, etc. So yeah, that's just the basic just in terms of that regard. I just think that that's very interesting. And what they're about to say next, I definitely have quite a bit to say about, quite a bit to talk about.
Whereas things like biology, climate, language, and culture, they're durable, but they still can change. And then you have the most dynamic, which is our experiences or general phenomena.
So I think that this is very interesting because that culture part, what I'm trying to address there is that culture can change. And so there's a number of different elements to the modern day culture that, particularly in Western countries, which I can speak with more authority to, especially since I am have been living in Western countries for a majority of my life. And what it is that I'm just trying to say is that the corruption of the liberal arts could be certainly amongst the world as well. In fact, in a lot of ways, I do believe that that is the case. But nonetheless, I digress. That there is this notion of, to one extent, to try to make the world a better place. I mean, us as people, human beings, Homo sapiens, we inherited a world where we didn't have to start from scratch. I mean, for me to be able to have this technology, this microphone, the computer that I'm using, I have a phone, I have a tablet, and apartment buildings, among other factors, houses, all of this different technology that's already pre-established, all of these factors of production, for example, and the different life cycles that go into some of these different businesses. Like, part of what I'm trying to say is that, for example, when it comes down to getting food, I didn't have to go and catch the fish. Someone else caught it, already put it into the shop. I just am able to go and buy it. We have Uber Eats, right? And that, I think that it's super cool that we have access to Uber Eats to be able to get food delivered straight to your door. Of course, it's relatively expensive, especially nowadays in 2024. I'm curious to know how 2025 goes. Well, I guess we'll see. New factors at play, new people in political careers. So we'll see, new and old, but nonetheless, we'll see what happens. My point just being is that I think that there is merit to us trying to make the world a better place. And that's one of what it is that I like to do. But at the same time, there's also, the world is what it is. And instead of trying to change the world, get better at navigating the world as it is right now. And so I do think, here we go. I do think that there are these two different ranges of the spectrum, as it were, and these two different ends of the spectrum. And what I'm trying to get at is that I do think that both is necessary, as much of a paradox as that may sound. like, I do think that it is necessary and ideal to be competent at the way the world actually is while being willing to try to make improvements to this world. Because, I mean, even that being a quite a fundamental essence of capitalism, for example, to try to make it so that we have a better standard of living than beforehand. And so a lot of that, and for me, is just being able to encourage a different set of behaviors that I consider to be more virtuous. And ideally, that comes across and other people share those values as well. Because I really do want to try to make those improvements to society. But I mean, I think that it can be really difficult when you have a bunch of people that are operating with the liberal arts in such a corrupt way. Nonetheless,
Most of the trivium concerns the absolute forms of knowledge as applied to durable circumstances. So why learn the trivium? The value in knowing liberal arts is not just that they are useful or that it is enjoyable, Lord knows this is not always the case, but that it actually makes you a better person for having learned them. It is akin to being able to do gymnastics. It actualizes a part of you, and as a result, you become more than what you are. The goal of a truly liberal arts education is to make you free. The word
and so I really do like that. I definitely do think that there is merit from the critical thinking, from thinking, trying to think from other like perspectives, and also being willing to acknowledge that you may be wrong about whatever it may be. But I also do think that there ought to be an environment where it's safe to do that as well, because certainly interacting with other people can be a toss up, and it depends on the subject matter. I mean, if they as I was saying, I mean, if I'm having a discussion with someone else who is trying to promote religion, for example, which I'll just flat out say that I am atheist agnostic at most per se, but I definitely operate my life secularly, and I don't reject religion completely. There's some parts of it that I do appreciate, some parts of it that I don't. Nonetheless, what I'm just trying to say is that sometimes some people may feel threatened, for example, because there is such an existential stake for that debate that if they were to lose, then it's as if they've lost a piece of their identity and who they are and the lifestyle that they built off that identity. So I'll definitely go into that in the future, but it's just there are certain incentives that people have to be corrupt in the way that they navigate the liberal arts. Nonetheless.
liberal comes from the Latin libertas, meaning free. The way the liberal arts does this is by giving you the tools to view the world from multiple perspectives. What often blinds us and binds us is our biases. The liberal arts allows you to take multiple perspectives and integrate them into a whole. Just as you integrate food into the body, with the liberal arts, you should be able to integrate information and knowledge into the mind.
And I think that a very important part of doing that, of integrating the knowledge and information into the mind, I think that a very, very, very important part of doing that is to not necessarily be mentally restricted to a particular identity in a way, or to a particular outcome with some of the information. So I've certainly struggled with that myself, but I do think that in a lot of ways that I am able to represent myself in new scenarios with the learnings of previous interpersonal interactions. But nonetheless,
It doesn't matter what you plan to do or what you are doing with your life. If you have a firm grasp on the trivium, you will be better prepared for anything. It is one of the best tools that enables you to learn. The Greek term for art is techne, where we get the term technology. The trivium is the technology of technologies. My goal is to present a version of the trivium.
did not mean to to open it up so hard, but yeah, like I just think that that's also very interesting that the liberal arts is technology that we could use to be able to get in a lot of ways closer to the truth, or a more accurate an accurate interpretation of what's going on in our world today.
And eventually, quadrivium, that is enjoyable and useful so you can more effectively learn whatever it is that captures your imagination. So, as a final note, one of my personal pet peeves is when people use the term medieval pejoratively. Usually, what they
Now, this is going to be one that I find is very interesting, but hear what he has to say when people use the term medieval pejoratively.
mean is ignorant, stupid, or brutish. It is often contrasted with our allegedly enlightened modern selves. The fact is, an educated medieval, even with his mistake in astronomy and biology, would probably mop the floor with you in a debate. I have no patience for what G.K. Chesterton calls, quote, chronological snobbery. If you find yourselves holding that prejudice to the past, I would urge you to reconsider and educate yourself before advertising your ignorance. We stand.
I mean, definitely quite poignant there, but yeah, I do think that it's very interesting that I certainly think that a lot of this has gotten better, but that in terms of people being more capable of forming a logical argument, but I also think that there's still so much corruption that I hope to be able to deter and help people join me in deterring the corruption. But nonetheless, my point ultimately being with this particular section is that it just goes back down to the modern day is not necessarily the best in every single metric. I mean, I've heard that apparently medieval people in medieval times in the feudal era that they had 150 days off in the year because they wouldn't really work in the winter. There wasn't really the possibility to be able to do crops or what have you. They had a guaranteed job, among other factors. So arguably they had a lot more time off than we do in the modern day, but nonetheless,
Stand on the shoulders of giants and would do well to have some humility in the.
that and even just in recent decades, right? I mean, as I said, I'm in my 30s. Our parents' generation, I'm a millennial, according to those metrics. So, our parents' generation, right? They were able to pay for university with a summer job. The housing was cheaper, the groceries were cheaper, all around transportation and gas or petrol was cheaper, among other factors. So it's just very interesting to me that the modern day is not necessarily in every single metric better.
Face of the great mysteries of life. With that, I need to be straightforward with expectations. Learning these arts is not easy. It cannot be done simply by watching YouTube videos. Thus, if you really want to acquire these skills, you're going to have to find a way to practice them. Nevertheless, I'm going to try to make it as painless as possible. Next time, we will start to look at the beginnings of grammar.
So that just right there, that's just what he wanted to.
Next time, we will start to look at the.
That's what he wanted to try to make the channel into intelligent. I'm not exactly sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but nonetheless, I already gave this one a like. And as you would also be able to work out right over here, that the next video never really came out. He did have another video, but I'll let that one go because basically, clearly the video's taken down. I knew this. I saw it years ago, but that's something else. But nonetheless, I really appreciate the contribution that this creator would have started off with, and I do wish that it was able to that he was able to continue. But I will be using some of the different videos here in some of my future content. But I will now just take a reference from yet another tab that I had open to present over here that, and then no, I'm not going to participate in that, and I'm just going to ignore that, or there's that. It is what it is, Wikipedia. I really do like what you offer, Wikipedia, but at the same time, I am just a small channel starting out. And so I'm not really in a position, I don't think, where I have an abundance of disposable income to be able to contribute to Wikipedia at this point in my life. But nonetheless, that image, I told y'all to remember that image, and here we are. Liberal arts education, from Latin liberalis, free, and ars, art, or principled practice, and I really like that, principled practice, is a traditional academic course in Western higher education. Liberal arts takes the term art in the sense of a learned skill rather than specifically the fine art. Liberal arts education can refer to studies in a liberal arts degree course or to a university education more generally. Such a course of study contrasts with those that are principally vocational, professional, or technical, as well as religiously based courses. And I find it interesting not to be confused with the humanities. Liberal arts redirects you not to be confused with the humanities, which I think is very interesting. Humanities are academic disciplines that study aspects of human society and culture, including certain fundamental questions asked by humans during the Renaissance. There you go, the Renaissance. As I said before, the term humanities referred to the study of classical literature and language. And there's more there, but I won't necessarily just go into that. But all I'm just trying to say is that, yeah, there's the liberal arts, but I do definitely think that the humanities, humanities is definitely a lot of what I want to bring to light in this YouTube channel and a lot of the broadcasts that I'm doing. But nonetheless, that's to say that I think that's very interesting. We do know that it's divided into the trivium and the quadrivium, and that the term liberal arts for an educational curriculum dates back to classical antiquity in the West. And so the classical antiquity, which is also known as the classical era, classical period, classical age, or simply antiquity, is a period of cultural European history between the 8th century BC and the 5th century AD. So we were even told in that video by Amor up until the 5th century AD, the 400s, and you can see the image also just right over here. See if I can get that one to be quite a lot bigger. Come on. I'm gonna try that one more time. There, it gave it to me, and then it's just not. Oh well, maybe I'll just try to get a bigger mouse in the future episode, bigger cursor. But nonetheless, and what it is that I'm trying to get at, right, with the classical antiquity and all of this, is that it just shows that how old they were, and that they're lost as of right now. So, some other personal takeaways from some of the personal notes that I have over here. So, grammar, to get more into this part of it, and we're going to certainly be putting a lot of emphasis into grammar in this. I think that language is very important. And while language is a construct that we as a species developed for a multitude of reasons, it baffles me that there are so many people to this day that are frankly very linguistically lazy and essentially give up on language, you know. And as I stated at the top of this live stream, and even in the introduction, I think that a lot of people in my past, at the very least, and in general, and even to a large extent in the modern day, were very inarticulate and suffered from alexithymia, so the inability to recognize and describe one's own emotions. And they would claim that there are no words to explain their feelings to cover up their alexithymia while appearing competent. And it's astonishing to me. It's like, do you want to be inarticulate? Like, I actually think that it's very negative and very much an insult to human potential to operate as though it is impossible to be able to become more competent with language. Literally, the only creatures that I can think of that don't talk are cavemen and babies when it comes down to the Homo sapien, and even the English from the Shakespearean age, the oldie English. That's improved as well. English has as a fact, improved over time. I can't really speak with authority to other languages, although I am trying to develop more in other languages, which is it's been a process for sure, but I definitely do think that there is still a necessity to upskill, especially though, even though I'm in my 30s, particularly in regards to just trying to keep up with the world. I mean, there's a lot more people. I've always thought that it's very interesting that people can come from a monolingual country and you have all of these other immigrants coming in that speak two different languages, and yet the monolingual people are so privileged that they just learn only know English the entirety of their lives. And I definitely do think that it is necessary to learn another language to also just have more of the world opened up to anybody, but sure, to myself as well, for sure. So I can't really speak to every single language, but nonetheless, I mean, I know I for a fact that I don't want to be inarticulate, and it can be problematic to have an idea, but to be unable to communicate it, particularly like unable to communicate that idea in regards to, say, for example, if you wanted to try to present a new business to Shark Tank or Dragon's Den or whatever it may be, or if you wanted to give an elevator pitch to someone of your business idea, if you wanted to try to demonstrate your value to someone else on a date, if you wanted to try to be charismatic and you're doing a presentation for a number of different reasons, I just think that it is, just exceptionally possible, right? For people to just lose their lose their ability to have an opportunity, right? If they are not equipped to be able to communicate what it is that they may be having on their mind. So I definitely do think that that is exceptionally important. And I also do think that just there's a lot of people that also use grammar in a very corrupted way. So, say, for example, like they would just lie, and I'm very much so, against that, right? Like, there's only really a very few scenarios where, because I think that people lie very easily when the stakes are exceptionally low. And I do find that to be particularly disgusting. I do think that there's really a lack of strength of character in that regard, because some people, I mean, they would be lying because, say, for example, they just don't want to like hang out with their friend, for example, which isn't as high of a stake of I'm lying and calling in sick because of not going to work per se. So there's that. Or if someone lied about a medical condition, or for example, I would consider that to be a lot more acceptable, in my personal opinion, certainly and for sure. And if I also thought that, maybe someone was, say, just like trying to think of like another example here. If if someone was like trying to lie to frankly protect a, I mean, as maybe not everyone necessarily going to agree with me on this, but like a criminal record or someone drove drunk and they just want to lie about whether or not like they are a criminal or what have you, depending on like, the situation, so that they're just able to avoid potential stigmas from other people. Like, I would consider that to be a lot more understandable than I mean, or even justifiable or even excusable, then I wanted to like lie to my boys about, how many chicks that I banged, or I want to lie to people about like how much money it is that I have or what have you. You know, I think that those are a lot more superficial and that a lot less is at stake in that regard. Certainly that there are stakes, but I don't really think that those stakes are that massive per se. But nonetheless, you know, I definitely think that language is very beautiful. And I definitely do think that verbal communication is underrated and very undervalued. I mean, literally, try to just go through your a week. I'll even give you like 1 week without talking. I mean, good luck with that, you know? Try to go 1 week without talking, you know? And that means that there's no reading. That means that there's no sign language, there's no texting either. It's not even like, oh, like I'm in a place and I'm in a foreign, place or what have you. Like no signs, no texting, no nothing. No translation. You just go without talking. I don't think that you'd last a week. So. And without language, there'd be no text, no hieroglyphs, a less tangible history. There'd be less nuance when evaluating situations, no literature, no code, hence no computers, no social media. A lot of the jobs that are based off of language would go away. For instance, so I would just hope that verbal communication can be more embraced and valued as an asset to overall communication in order to have more productive conversations in an attempt to find the words to better interpret our feelings, the situations we experience, and to overcome problems as well. And as I was saying, the extent to which people have become really corrupt with their use of language is just really disgusting to me. And so I wanted to bring up another example. There is this playlist, and it is now available right over here. And there's certainly some terminology on there that I don't necessarily want to have on the screen for too long. But one of the videos that I do like here, literally a whole playlist, let's be honest, consisting of 34 videos, also from 9 years ago. So as you can see, some of this has already, been in the culture for a while, but I still do think that it's very relevant to today, and I do want to try to put in my effort to try to curb some of this. So let's go into. I really like this video. I don't want.
Man, Zach, you put the power in PowerPoint today. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Hey guys, don't forget party this weekend. My place. Bring booze, chips, and most importantly, yourselves.
Cool.
Oh, I can't.
Now watch this. A party. You got an invite to a party. Let's see. Ooh.
Make it on Friday. I agreed to help a friend move, and I don't know what time we're gonna be done.
Yeah, I wish I could go too, but my dad's in town. I gotta show him around the old city. You know how dads are.
Dad loves cities.
They do.
Sure.
Well, bummer. Well, what about you, Quinta?
Oh, I can't go either because I don't want to. Sorry.
So there you go. So, one of them is like, oh, like, dad's in the city, they're making excuses saying that they're preoccupied with some other plans. And she's saying, oh, I can't because I don't want to. And, you see the facial reaction. It's almost like a dun, 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 and I think that that's really hilarious. I'll play some more of the video.
I'm sorry. Do you have something to do?
No, I just don't want to go.
Do you? Is your dad in town? And you have to take him around the city too?
Oh, no. My dad is living peacefully in Philadelphia. He hasn't visited in years. I just don't want to go.
You don't want.
So as you can see now, they're trying to help her make excuses so that she just isn't going to be straightforward and honest, which I think is really hilarious, but nonetheless.
To go because it's far away. Because it's in Studio City, and that's a drive.
I actually live pretty close to Studio City in the Valley. Yeah. I just don't want to attend the party.
I'm sorry, Quinta. Is this something I did?
Oh my God, Justin, no. Where are you kidding me? You're a dear. You didn't do anything.
Oh my gosh, is this something that I did? Trying to figure out what the issue could be here and how she's acting in a way that's so non-aligned with the culture.
Anything. I just would rather not and will not be attending your party.
Hold on. Is it because you have an improv class that night? That's what it is.
No, that's actually at 3:00 p.m. in the afternoon.
Oh, but that night you've got roller derby. That's why you can't go.
Thank you so much for remembering, Steve. Such a doll, but that actually got canceled this weekend.
Quinta, let me get this straight.
Yeah.
So, yep, continuing to help make excuses for her, and yet none of it is necessarily sticking. She's still maintaining her position of no, I appreciate that you remembered these different elements of my life, but I still just don't want to go.
Yeah.
I'm having a party.
Yes.
And you are my friend.
I am.
And I invited you.
Thank you.
But
I am not going to that party.
What are you going to do instead?
What is your reason for not going to his party?
Oh, the reason that I am not going to Justin's party is that I do not want to go to Justin's party.
Hold on.
So I also, and you see the man on the left and just how shocked and surprised they are. But nonetheless, I just think that it's very interesting. What is your reason for not wanting to go? I mean, I do think that it is a valid reason that, you don't want to go. But I also do think that there is, why don't you want to go? I also do think that that's a factor as well. So all that being said, all I'm just trying to say is that it could be, I don't want to spend money for on that day, or it could be I just don't necessarily like to go to parties like that. There could be a number of actual reasons, but she's just for the purpose of this video, she's just sticking with I don't want to go. So let's just rock with that.
Let's figure this out.
Okay.
I invited you
Yes.
to a party, which means Quinta goes. Right?
Okay, let me show you the problem with your logic there. Let me get that math just a little off. So, see what you did here, but what you forgot was X, which is I don't want to go, which then changes the outcome to I am not going.
Wait, what?
They're so incredulous. They just can't believe it, and of course this is a skit, but nonetheless.
Simple math.
I get it. Quinta here is trying to pull a fast one on us. She's saying that she's not going to go. She's going to show up halfway through the party and yell surprise. It's an opposite surprise party.
That's genius.
Okay.
That is a really fun way to think of it, you guys. If the surprise is that I will not be there because I'm not going.
Come on. I'm having a party and I invited.
I really just still think that that's a very hilarious. They're continuing to just figure out some of these different excuses and some of these different reasons so that it can fit into a framework that they actually understand and that are comfortable with and that aligns with their cultural expectations.
You and you're just not going to go because you don't want to go? At least these guys came up with valid excuses.
Now, I really like this part. This is one of my favorite parts of the skit.
Right, guys? Steve?
I wish I could be as honest as Quinta.
I'm not going because I don't want to go.
I mean, my dad actually is in town and wants to go see the city, but I mean...
Yeah, I just think that that's I'm not going because I don't want to go. So you see they're masking that their actual intentions are and creating this excuse, which I'll certainly have a lot more to say about momentarily.
If he wants to go to your party, then maybe.
Hello, son.
Oh, hey, sir. Would you be interested in coming to my party?
No, I don't want to go to your party.
And I'm just going to close that one right there because I just don't want that to linger on the screen for way too long. So as you could see, I'm certainly going to just go back and yeah, just leave it about there. I think that that's really, and this is still on the screen. Okay, I definitely did not want some of those wordings, some of the words that were there on the screen. So I just find it very interesting because it goes back to the feels before reels. I mean, I think that honesty in a lot of cases is the best policy, although honesty can be considered to be pretty stupid if you are not getting what it is that you want out of the situation, which I mean, I certainly have a lot more to say about intelligence in the future live stream and video. But nonetheless, I definitely do think that honesty is the best policy in general. I do think that honesty is kindness. However, especially in, at the very least, Western culture, very indirect societies. And one of the parts that I really don't like about that, and that I think is frankly particularly cancerous about the societies, is how much it just, in a lot of ways, it would actually defend and emphasize lying and talk about how that is the what is preferred. You know, I really do despise how indirect Western societies are. I think it comes from societal conditioning that establishes a status quo of indirectness and that being direct is rude. I definitely do disagree. I think that honesty is generally the best policy and that honesty is kindness, as I've said. I don't think that honesty and brutality are intrinsically intertwined. And I also think that it's possible to be honest while having restraint. So, for example, you don't have to say everything that's on your mind, especially since, frankly, I think some of it is not always going to be productive anyways. I mean, someone could say just volunteering feedback, I wouldn't say is a way to go that I would encourage. Certainly not. I definitely think that what is superior, and I might just, yeah, that's right. I definitely think that what is superior would be to be honest if feedback is directly asked for. That being said, and if you ask a question, be prepared for the answer, or just don't ask a question you don't want the answer to. For example, do I look fat in this dress? Like you asked, and some people may say that, like, oh, but like, do the answer, particularly as a man, like, do the answer that's like going to get you laid, essentially, or they're asking, do you love me, and what have you. But this is exactly what I mean. Like, I really don't like that the direct communication is very demonized in society. I definitely do think that honesty and brutality are not inherently within each other. That, in a number of different situations, I also think that the field of for reals culture is another factor that contributes to what I believe to be is a big problem. For example, say that someone is lying to someone else because, for example, oh, one person smoking cigarettes and another person well, it may be like, unsolicited or what have you, but maybe someone's saying like, oh, like, I'm really struggling with my budget, do you have like any feedback or what have you? And then the other person saying, well, should consider to stop smoking cigarettes. I mean, I can imagine there's literally people who are in some sort of economic turmoil that are continuing to smoke cigarettes or buy alcohol or buy broccoli, let's say, a certain plant that will get you elevated, if you will, which is legal depending on where you are in the world. But that being said, imagine, some of that, some of someone who's saying that essentially I should lie to them effectively and be all like, oh, don't worry about that. You mean don't worry about the way that you're budgeting? Oh, don't worry about your health. Keep doing what you're doing. You'll be fine. Someone's failing a class, but oh, just keep doing what you're doing. You'll be fine. You got this. I believe in you. As opposed to at the same time, I'm not saying trying to say to someone, oh, you're an effing addict. Oh, you're an effing idiot. Oh, you're so financially irresponsible and you should be signing away your bank account to another person. You're going to fail this class and you have no hope. I wouldn't go be saying, I'm not saying to not have a certain level of decorum to these people. What it is that I am saying is to still be honest without just being flagrantly disrespectful, essentially, and to not mask disrespect with honesty as well, because some people will do that too. Part of, are you talking to someone in a particularly safe space? So these are some of these other factors that I do think are very important as well, with a lot of what it is that I'm trying to advocate for. And I'd want people to be more honest, to say, no, I'm not particularly interested in going. I'm trying to budget at this point. I'm not interested in parties. I'd rather not hang out with some other people. I like you people, but I'm not necessarily comfortable with the other friends that you may be inviting. you know and I think that this feels for reals mentality leads to people having low mental resilience, and I actually think that it's negative and understanding and it's underestimating of human potential to think this way, like I said before. Just like one can work out to improve their muscles, one can also improve their mental resilience by getting better at feeling bad, for there is no pain without pleasure. you know and while I realize that people want to be happy, you just can't be happy all the time. So there's even people who would talk about, oh, like, I want you to lie to protect my secret. And like I said, just how people lie so much when the stakes are so low. But even, oh, like, I want you to lie to protect my secret. It's hilarious to me. It's like you want liars for friends. It's just very hilarious to me. But I suppose sarcasm is lying too, but nonetheless, it's wild to me that someone would be so furious because someone else is so principled. It's like it's almost like saying person A just doesn't like people who cheat, person B is cheating, and then person A has a problem with that, and person B doesn't like that person A has a problem with that, with cheating. Like and I could imagine there's so much that goes into it, and perhaps person B identifies with that and is threatened by the notion, or just doesn't like the notion that they are the villain of someone else's story. So yeah, I just think that that's very hilarious. But nonetheless, I'm going to just add in just a couple more factors here. I'm going to, show off this. A Google search that an easy decision, hard life, hard decision, easy life. I think that this just sums up what I'm trying to say. Do what is easy and your life will be hard. Do what is hard and your life will become easy. And I really do think that there's a lot of kindness that's associated with this, particularly with this particular piece of content that I have for you here. This is coming from Chris Williamson, over 3 million subscribers on YouTube. Definitely someone who I consider to be particularly inspirational. And I would certainly encourage a lot of you to go and subscribe to Chris Williamson on YouTube. I think that there's a lot that he really contributes very well. And to the society. I mean, I don't agree with everything that he says, but nonetheless, I just do respect a lot of what it is that he's done. So, toxic compassion. The latest social science tells us that children raised in single mother homes. Okay. Well, toxic compassion. Hang on a minute. Let's go into another part. Yes. Toxic compassion is the prioritization of short term emotional comfort over everything else, over truth, reality, actual long term outcomes, flourishing, everything. It optimizes for looking good rather than doing good. This is seen in much of popular culture as the desirable, fair, empathetic thing to do, and it's everywhere. People would rather claim that body fat has no bearing on health and mortality outcomes to avoid making overweight individuals upset, even if this causes them to literally die sooner or have a worse quality of life over the long run. Parents would rather allow children to play computer games or watch screens and access social media every night instead of dealing with the discomfort of taking it away from them, even if it ruins their brain development, social skills, and self esteem. People would rather say that children growing up in single parent households suffer no worse outcomes than those from two parent homes. You know, even if this misleads parents, children, and teachers about why kids behave the way they do. And, there's a lot more into this, but like, it'll say, okay, so Elon Musk once responded to criticism about his political alignment and contribution to climate change. Now, I'm not trying to be political here, I'm just reading the example. He identified how big of a shift Tesla had caused in the electric vehicle market and the downstream impact of that on the environment, saying that he's done more for the climate than any other human in history. What I care about is the reality of goodness, not the perception of it. And what I see all over the place is people who care about looking good while doing evil. The important trade-off with all of these examples is between appearing good and actually doing good. Now, I do think that the perception of good is also necessary because if people, what people do think of you really does matter. And I used to think, oh, don't care what other people think. But I mean, reputation, people, your quality of life can plummet precipitously as a byproduct of your reputation. So that's for future episodes, but nonetheless. Telling people what they want to hear, giving them immediate gratification, and avoiding saying anything that could cause distress prioritizes the former over the latter. The net effect is often wildly negative. It's the toddler who wants to eat ice cream every night. Sure, that might be what they want in the moment, but it'll be wildly unhealthy over the long term. I asked Jordan Peterson about this last year. That's exactly what the Oedipial, my apologies if I'm butchering that, situation is. It's the prioritization of short term emotional comfort over long term thriving. Again, feels before reals. It's going to hurt now, but the long consequences are positive. If you give up your children to the world, you will keep them. The prospect of appearing bad while doing good is obviously not very enticing. The opposite is performative empathy, saying whatever is required to look good even if you don't actually care. And on the internet, the gap between words and actions has never been bigger. You can be the least virtuous, meanest, most dishonest human on earth, but if you say the right things on social media, you look like a saint. No one stress tests the words coming out of people's mouths, which means that appearing good becomes more important than doing good. And performative empathy is more rewarded than genuine empathy. By all means, I definitely think that the only person that you can trust 100% is yourself. I think that the only person that's going to have your back 100% is yourself. All of that going to say, even for me, I mean, by all means, put this through your own independent filter of truth and think for yourself. By all means, please think for yourself. And posting about mistreated groups is more incentivized than helping mistreated groups. Puts flag in bio, has never actually donated to a charity, which, Chris Williamson is saying. Or Jordan Peterson. But nonetheless, this isn't me saying that you can't do good whilst talking about it, but that many, maybe even most of the people who proselytize, so Jordan Peterson talking about how virtuous and carrying they are. I just know that from the vocabulary, and how it's everyone else who is evil, uncaring, and the enemy are allowing their morality to stand on the shoulders of limited scrutiny. It's like, look how good I am. Well, if the look at becomes the how good I am, sorry, if the look at comes before the how good I am, it really wreaks havoc on the claim. Beware the people who prioritize saying good things, they might not be doing good things. And this comes from Chris Williamson's newsletter. Definitely do recommend that you sign up for that one. I'm going to give him a like on social media right over here. Chris Williamson X, 2.3 million followers on Instagram, and so much going for him, definitely. But one of the factors that I really just wanted to emphasize based off of Chris Williamson X is how he did manage to get 3 million subscribers to his YouTube channel. And that was as of just the end of this year. So by all means, he's been doing an excellent job. And I certainly am jealous of him. Certainly would like to be able to get to that same level of notoriety and same level of impact on the world. But with that all being said, for the time being, it's definitely been an hour and a quarter in that regard. And so I do think that that is going to be as far as I will be going for this particular live stream. Do want to make sure that I thank you all for your time and attention for this very first proper episode of the It Be What It Be podcast, and would certainly like to encourage you all to take once again another look at the YouTube channel, which I am going to be bringing up for you just right over here. I'm going to be doing some more shorts based off of this live stream that I just uploaded. And as you can see, we're still going, we're still live, new channel, really trying to do my best to be able to get to a point where I'm hitting the ground running next year. But I really do appreciate a lot of your support thus far. And I am going to be doing a part 2 to this video to continue talking about the Trivium and the liberal arts. There's certainly a lot more that I really want to be able to say about this, but we have run out of time today. And also, I mean, I am trying to keep this around the hour mark. I'm not going to be so strict about that, but nonetheless, I'm still kind of figuring out the flow here. But with all that being said, thank you very much once again for your attention, and be sure to catch us on the next episode. Ooh, and of course, I'll re-input to follow on Instagram, to follow on Instagram, on Threads, Twitter /X Blue Sky, TikTok. We have some of the different links over there. And to like, comment, and subscribe. Would like to hear what it is that you have to say about the Trivium and about the way that the liberal arts have been applied to the modern day and in the contemporary age. Otherwise, now I will officially say thank you very much for joining me here today and for your time watching the stream. And I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.